Let's start that again, and we'll, for those of you watching live, pardon the interruption, and for those of you that are watching on YouTube during the recording, we had a little kerfuffle, and it is now fixed. So anyway, thanks for joining Android Design in Action. Once again, I'm your host, Roman Nurik, joining from Chelsea Market, our wonderful new little recording studio here in New York City. And I'm joined today by Nick Butcher.
Hello, from London.
Hailing all the way from London. And today we're going to talk about football apps. And the Super Bowl just happened, so everybody's probably thinking, oh, American football apps. No, we're going to be talking about the other kind of football, soccer or European football, if you call it something else. So,
or if you're anywhere in the rest of the world other than America, just football.
Right. Well, the Australians apparently call it something else, right? Well, they call it soccer as well. I don't know. Never mind. So we're going to talk about football tracking apps, but we're really going to talk about one app. We're going to look at an app called LiveScore Addicts.
Maybe we should just interject a little bit. In exchange from our regular format where we normally kind of work with the App Clinic, so the App Clinic will take a look at a bunch of applications within a given topic, and then we'll turn our attention to one and try and re-envisage how it might look with the application of the Android design principles. We're mixing up a little bit here. And we're actually going to go first with looking at one application which has come up from the suggested topic from the App Clinic, and then those guys are going to take it from us and kind of run with some of our suggestions, and going to go a little bit deeper into some of the implementation steps for the more developer crowd out there.
Absolutely. Good catch, Nick. So it is kind of a new format. If you're looking to nominate your app to be reviewed at some point on the App Clinic and Android Design in Action, please still keep using the Trello board for now. We're going to keep sourcing stuff from there. And also, if it is a self-nomination, if you're nominating your own app, please make sure to state that, because we want to make sure that folks that are nominating their own app get precedence. So with that, we're also going to talk about launcher icons, specifically, the icons that appear, that represent your application in both the Play Store on the Google Play client, as well as on the web, as well as on the device once you install it. So with that, let's get started. So like I said, we're going to talk about why this tablet keeps shutting off. So like I said, we're going to talk about football apps and specifically LiveScore Addicts. So let's get started. Nick, do you want to introduce LiveScore Addicts?
Sure. So for anyone who is a football or soccer fan, this is one of those applications which lets you keep on top of fixtures and results, essentially. It's quite a focused application. It doesn't do the whole gamut of kind of like news and everything around that. It's very much about kind of keeping track of what's just happened or what's coming up, as well as having quite a strong kind of during the game focus as well. So you might want to kind of have this application open, be receiving notifications, and see what's going on with other teams playing at the same time. It's worth noting actually the developers have just put out a redesign, and I hear it's a great improvement on the previous look and feel of the application, and I think they've done a pretty decent job. But we've kind of done a little deep dive on some of the kind of fit and finish and polish aspects of the application to really make it kind of shine, we feel.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, anytime we look at an app and we provide redesigns, it's really not, we're not saying that the app is currently designed poorly or anything like that. We're just exploring other ways in which to present that information. We do sometimes look at apps that are worse, I guess generally worse from an aesthetic and a UI standpoint, but we definitely don't mean to say your app sucks. Here's a better version. It's purely just here are some thoughts in which that you can use to improve the app. So with that, so this is the first screen that we're going to take a look at. We're going to take a look at about 3 or 4 screens. This is basically the onboarding process, and it's kind of a wizard where it takes you through the different leagues and lets you kind of customize what are the things you want to see in the app. What are you interested in? I mean, I'm guessing if you're a football fan, you're not interested in every single league out there because there are millions. Even just within the UK, there are probably hundreds or thousands or something. So you can really customize what specific leagues you're interested in, and then in the later steps, you actually get to customize the notifications, which things you want to be notified of, in the notification in the status bar. So we took a look at this screen and we thought, how can we make it feel a little more Android-y? And so we came up with a version that's using a more common wizard-like UI. And this is actually, I posted some sample code for this a few months ago. It was called Wizard Pager. So this is using some hints from that Wizard Pager, including things like having a bottom bar for next and previous. It's worth noting here that some folks think, oh, there's already a back button on the device. Why wouldn't you just use that? Well, I actually had a talk with our design team, our Android user experience team, and they felt that in this case, this is actually one of those really weird edge cases where you don't actually want to overload the back button to go back in the wizard, since you have a very apparent on-screen next affordance. So, so previous and next, and at the bottom, very similar to like an OK cancel presentation in dialogues. And then for indicating which step you're looking at, there's this little kind of strip at the top that indicates you're past step 1, and now you're looking at step 2. And step 2 is highlighted in green, which is your current step. Additionally, we kind of bumped up the size of the imagery, and again, in general, we love to make images larger, or image content larger, because it's a little more engaging. And so we made the country logo a little larger. We made the text a little larger, and then we also used more hollow style elements for the checkboxes and things like that. So some very basic stuff, but overall, we kind of tweaked the screen to more prominently highlight the content. We actually we had added an action bar at the top that's using a different palette, an inverted palette, so that it kind of fades away and feels more like the part of the system Chrome, the system UI, rather than part of the application in this case, and a couple of things like that. Before we move on, Nick, is there anything you wanted to add to Wizards or
No,
onboarding
well, I just think well, it might seem like there's very small changes in the screen. For me, it really works because the use of more standard controls is really kind of makes it a lot easier to appreciate what's going on this page. And that's very important when you're talking about the very first thing the user's going to see when they first run this application. You've got this small window of time to convince the user that your application is easy to use and they want to keep it and it's going to be useful. So I think little bits like using the standard controls and making it immediately obvious and easy to kind of like to parse the screen, as it were, and understand what it's offering you, it really help here. I mean, better than this might all even be to some kind of sensible defaults. So you might auto detect which country they're in and opt them into some sensible defaults, and then allow the user to kind of go through this customization flow at a later point, because it really is this very crucial time, the first time a user runs an app. So yeah, the visual changes here for me are really great. I mean, the bar at the top on the original showing which step you're currently on didn't really speak to me. It's quite low contrast showing the current step, and there's repeated icons.
Right, there's just a little white sliver, and it's white on like a tan background, so the contrast is very poor there.
Yeah, and having to move your thumb like all the way to the top corner to hit next and so on. That I think that the small changes that we've made really make this screen much easier to kind of understand and use.
Okay, and one other thing I wanted to mention is, in general, we actually have a very good document in the design guide that talks about help as well as like tutorials. So in general, the guidance there is actually, if a user doesn't need to make a decision immediately, if you can just stick with the default, and that's okay for like 60-70% of people, let them skip the tutorial. You don't want to force them to go through something. In this case, you could argue that the user has to choose what they're interested in, because otherwise you won't be able to present them any sort of useful data. But as soon as you're done, you're done specifying the one thing you're interested in, let the user skip. So find some way to provide like a skip or just get started now function. So let's move on to the next screen, which we looked at, which was the list of matches. And so on the left here, you see the list of matches, and you'll notice that there's actually a number of different ways you can sort this. You can sort this by the league. You can sort this by time. A number of different things. There's also, we'll show this in the next screen, but there's also the navigation drawer on the left, and we'll talk about that in a bit. There's also this button here that filters by only live now matches, so only matches that are currently live. And then you can swipe left and right between yesterday and tomorrow, as well as today. The issue I found with this was that there's not actually a yesterday -1 and a yesterday -2 and so on. You can only see those 3 dates. And it may be because of some sort of policy thing, or maybe they just don't have the data. But in that case, do you really need a set of scrollable tabs? So what we decided to do here was we kind of reimagined what it would look like with just tabs in a slightly different color scheme. We actually tweaked the color scheme from like a very like deep orangey brown to a slightly more subdued brown, and then we used a kind of like a turf, I call it a turf green, as the highlight, as the single accent that's used throughout. So this kind of darkish, desaturated brown combined with the green kind of gives it a more earthy, a little more simpler feel, I'd say. And then we also switched over to the fixed tabs to show yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And again, you should still be able to swipe between the three. We also removed the navigation jar and switched to an action bar spinner, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. And then we used a slightly different presentation for the actual content, the actual matches themselves. We slightly made the live matches a little more prominent. In that left column here, you'll see that live matches are kind of highlighted in green. And then anytime you have set up notifications for individual match, if you decided that I really want to follow what happens in this match, you see a little kind of green tick at the very top right. And it's not interactive. It's probably worth mentioning that if you wanted to make this interactive, have like a notification button right in line with the list item, this should look very different. But this is a very clear signal that it's not interactive, it's purely an indicator. We also bumped up the, we bumped up the country flags a little bit just to make that pop a little more, since that's probably something that's going to get your attention fairly quickly. And we used Roboto Thin, actually Roboto Light here, as well as Roboto Bold Condensed to show the actual current scores. So I know that was a whammy. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, Nick, on the screen?
It's got some room to breathe now. I think the last screen, the before version as it were, tried to stuff a lot of content into the screen, and in doing so made it less parsable. I find it quite hard to kind of like find the individual event I'm looking for. So in the reimagining, I really like the way that you used space and color and contrast to really kind of give a hierarchy to the information. So it's really easy to find, the section you're looking for, then the game you're looking for, or things like that are important, like a goal that's just scored or a game that's on now, really jump out. So I think the information hierarchy is really what stings here for me.
And I think one of the biggest contrasts here is the information density. You'll see on the left, in the current screen, the information density is very high. So you can see a lot of matches all at once. But I mean, my guess is in general, if you're a fan following just a few games that are happening now, you probably don't really care about all that information. You probably do care about the 2 or 3 current games, as well as maybe a specific league that has games today. So don't be afraid of letting your content breathe by increasing margins, increasing spacing, and slightly lowering information density. It'll make things a little more readable, as well as make your content a little more consumable. And just overall kind of improve the aesthetic in general. So let's move on to the next screen, which I wanted to talk about, and this is the navigation jar versus the action bar spinner. So the navigation jar here provides you access to things like matches, competitions, and teams, which are kind of like the top 3, the 3 top-level structural elements, as well as settings and more. And this is something that we pointed out on the last in the last episode in the Hangout. Things like settings or help or about or even just more stuff, they generally don't belong immediately on screen or in the primary navigation area. And we've specifically kind of outlined that things like settings, help, about, terms of service, privacy policy, those should really belong in the action bar overflow. So when you press this action bar overflow here in the action bar, you should see things like settings and help and about. So we would probably move things like that to there. So if you remove settings and more, you're just left with 3 items. And with only 3 items to choose from, 3 navigational components, the navigation jar becomes a little bare. And so what you could do instead is you could either use tabs or an action bar spinner. In this case, we're already using tabs to switch between yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so we decided to switch to the action bar spinner as the top level core kind of structural navigational component. And so there you can switch between matches, competitions, and teams, and it very clearly, it makes clear the 3 main sections of the app. So let's move on to the next component, or the next screen that we looked at, which was the match detail screen. And in the match detail screen, we looked at a couple things. Specifically, we looked at the statistics tab. We also looked at just the presentation of the current game state. So on the left, you'll notice that you have the position title strip, or the scrollable tabs at the top, and then the content at the bottom. And then somewhere in the middle is actually a fixed pane, or a fixed, I guess a fixed UI element that indicates the current state of the game. And so as you're swiping left and right on the content or on the top scrollable tabs, the middle part stays fixed, but the top and bottom actually slide together. And so it kind of loses that feeling of connectivity, that or like almost like this tactile feeling that you're actually moving a single surface. And so what we decided to do is actually flip the two, and we moved the scrollable tabs below that fixed pane at the top. We also tweaked the presentation to again kind of fall in with our color scheme of that brown and green, and we also used basic text contrast like dark on accent or white on accent to again show, or I guess more prominently show, the visual hierarchy of the information. The most important thing on the screen right now is the current score, 2-1, as well as alternate or ulterior elements such as the names of the teams as well as the current time. And then we took a look at statistics. How can we make statistics look better in general? Not much to say here. We just, again, used the same color scheme. We simplified everything into a single row of information. You notice that on the left you have a row indicating the details, and then a row for the progress bar. Or not really the progress bar, I guess the stats bar. We simply integrated the two into a single row so that it's much easier to scan. All right, so that was a doozy. Nick, anything you want to add here?
No, you summed it up really nicely. I think the presentation really works much better. It's a lot more glanceable. You can just kind of have a glance at it and see which way the game is going by the stats. And as well, I completely agree about connecting the pager title strip to the actual view pager. It felt quite disconnected before on the before version, when you're moving the body of the content and there's a stationary bit between you and the tab strip moving. It felt very disconnected, so it's a good change there.
Another thing I'll mention is that in the current details for the game, like what's the current game state, you'll see that there's a little notification icon. It's not interactive, and so it's not really useful. It's just an indicator saying that yes, you have notifications turned on for this game or not. So we actually made that an action bar icon, so that when you touch that, it toggles the state of whether or not you want notifications for the game. All right, so let's move to the next screen, which is the tablet mockup. And Nick, do you want to talk about this one?
Here we've really focused on the in-game experience. We figured that tablet is mostly going to be used kind of, you're sat at home, you're watching the game already, and you're kind of wanting to kind of have a second screen experience. So what we've tried to do here is float up all the different sections that on the phone version are in a kind of view pager type setup onto a single kind of HUD, a single dashboard. So as Roman pointed out, the most important thing on the screen is the current score, what's going on. So we've made that kind of very, very big and bold and very clear exactly what's going on. You can't really miss the current score on the screen here. And the rest of the information, we've kind of had this kind of horizontally scrollable, so you can actually flick around and see what's going on. Are some new videos being posted? How has the live table changed, or didn't quite finish the lineup here, but you can click in to see some of the lineup, who's playing in the roster. So we've really tried to use the extra real estate to kind of make the information easier to get at and kind of a bit more playful and visual than the phone kind of view pages setup, but while retaining the most important information on the screen the whole time.
Yeah, and I think that the addition of the logos for the teams is also another way to use visual elements to better kind of hint at what's going on. So you could do even more here. You could do things like you could have the background use or take the team logos and use them in the background, in a blurry state. You can really make this really immersive, and I think this is a great start. This is a great way to start showing all the different pieces, almost like a game dashboard all at once on a tablet when you have a larger screen.
Yep.
All right, so let's, in the interest of time, let's move on to rich notification. And this is something that Chris Baines put together. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to join, which kind of sucks. He should definitely join next time. But this is an example expanded notification for, let's say you turn on notifications for a specific game and something happens, and let's say you then expand it. So here's, what it can look like. And this is using the custom layout. Again, you have different options for rich notifications. You can just show a photo or more text, but you can also provide a custom layout entirely. And so this is an example of what that can look like. You still use the app icon to some degree to indicate that you're looking at the LiveScore Addicts app. And so that's what that little soccer ball icon means. But you also show, the most important information first, which is, the current score, as well as what was the latest score. So, in the 20th minute, I'm going to butcher his name. Is it Popescu or Popescu?
Sure.
Okay. In the 20th minute, this guy scored a goal, which is great information to see as soon as you, expand the notification.
Yeah, this is a great start to it. I think there's a lot of potential for rich notifications in things like sports updates. Like you want to have the information kind of quickly, but if you can have a much richer visual way of delivering it, I think users are going to be delighted by that. I think that's something they're going to see and really, really kind of like jump on about your application. So I think there's a lot of stuff you could do here. I mean, we were playing around with some ideas, and we talked about maybe having a freeze frame of the goal or the celebration as the picture payload or the rich notification. There's a lot of things that you could do with an application here, which I'm quite excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can use photos, anytime you have access to photo content, showing it there, or even a thumbnail, a still from a video, is really useful. And if you show a video, you can even do something like overlay a fake, play icon to indicate that this is a video. So definitely use all the content that you have to your advantage. And rich notifications, it's really easy. All you need to do is use notification compat, provide some intents, and you're set. So there's no reason not to do it. Let's move on in the interest of time. So that was it for football apps and LiveScore Addicts. Let's jump into launcher icons. I think we're running a little low on time since we had that little kerfuffle in the beginning, but we'll try to zoom through this. So launcher icons. Basically, the Android Design Guide has a little bit about icons in general. So an icon is a graphic that takes up a small portion of screen real estate, provides a quick, intuitive representation of an action, a status, or your app. So really, in the space of 48 by 48 dips, you have to make the best use of that space to represent what your app does, what it means. Whether that's an icon representing your brand if you have an existing service, or if it's a utility app, in that space, try as best as possible to represent what the user will benefit from once they use your app. So one example is there's a little side project that I worked on that was just basically a single text box notepad, and the icon was literally just a text box. It showed a little cursor, and it showed the text box. So you can do things like that. You don't necessarily have to use this synecdoche to take like this very abstract idea and compress it down into a single little object, but certainly that's one possible way. So let's look at some guidelines on launcher icons. Again, the size, the actual asset size is 48 by 48 dips. In XHDPI, that's 96 by 96. For tablets, for Nexus 10 specifically, you should provide an XHDPI icon, and that's 144 by 144 pixels. Also, when you upload your app to Google Play, it requests a large app icon so they can show it in all its beautiful glory on tablets and phones and so on. And that should be 512 by 512 pixels. And generally, what we found is you can probably start by designing a 512 by 512. Maybe I actually use 576 by 576 for some reason. You can start with that and then slowly scale down. It's generally a good idea to start large and scale down rather than vice versa. And then in terms of padding, this is something that's definitely changed over the years for Android. We used to request a fairly large padding region, but these days you should really just use either the full image size, meaning no padding, or if you have a very, very square icon, then try to use about 3 dips of padding, give or take. It's really up to you, but in general, try to make it fit in nicely with the rest of the system icons as well as third-party icons, and those are generally going to take up the full image size or have about 1 to 3 dips of padding. Before we move on and fly through this, Nick, any other comments on launchers?
No, you're nailing it. Go for it.
All right, let's do it. So a couple more guidelines. Try to use a distinct silhouette. So don't just stick some graphic inside of a square or a circle. That can work for now. It can work as a default, but try to really use a distinct silhouette, and we'll show good examples of that in a bit. Also, keep it simple at the top. Make sure that your icon, when it's scaled down, it still means something. It still makes sense. But at the very micro level, feel free to add details like noise or subtle drop shadows and things like that as you see fit. And then very important, don't try to mimic other platforms. So if you have an existing app on Windows Phone or on iPhone, iOS, don't just simply copy over your icon. It's okay to copy over the general idea for the icon, but make sure that it fits well with the rest of the system and fits in with the guidelines. So let's look at, actually before we look at some examples, we recently made changes to the guidelines in the sense that it used to be just facing forward. You should make your icon facing forward, but now there's a slight 3D perspective. You'll see some examples here. There's just a few dips of perspective that you see at the very top, and here's the rough kind of camera angle that you could use to achieve that. We don't have any numbers or dimensions or anything, but somebody asked for the numbers. This is the best we could do for now, but here's roughly what it should look like if you're doing this in a 3D editing piece of 3D editing software. And here's some not good examples yet. We're not there yet. Some tools that can help you with icon generation. There's the Android Asset Studio, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. it can actually just generate icons for you just to start with. You should probably, when you're ready to ship your product, definitely hire a designer and have them do like a custom icon for you that has a distinct silhouette that is very, very unique to your app. It's going to really make it pop when users are scanning Google Play. As well as the boilerplates that are provided for free by AndroidIcons.com. So they also give you circle and square icons, but using those basic shapes, you can change it to whatever silhouette you need. The good thing about these is that it actually has that correct perspective and correct styling, actually correct example styling that you can use, as well as different sizes. They actually provide the 512 by 512, as well as the all the different smaller sizes that are shown on the device. And finally, here we're at a few examples of icons that follow our guidelines. So Falcon Pro is an example, and they show a slight perspective above the kind of futuristic bird-like creature. Page Once uses kind of a circle, a very basic circle, but that's their app icon. That's their branding, is very circular. Pocket, which does something interesting with the perspective. They actually show their brand colors in the depth of that square. Expedia, which is one of my favorites, and this is again a very distinct silhouette. It's a briefcase effectively, but it shows their branding really well. And that briefcase again is tilted at just the right perspective. We also have some good examples from Google I/O app, which we've open sourced, as well as Solid Explorer, which is a file explorer app. And again, it's a folder that's slightly open and has that very slight perspective at the top. All right, so I think that was it for launcher icons. And if you all have,
just to underline that, I think this is one of the most important assets that you put in your entire application. Like, users will judge your application, when you're scanning a list of applications in the Play Store, like on your icon almost alone. So if you do definitely work with a designer and make sure they understand these guidelines that we put out, because this is such an important asset.
Yeah, we probably should have mentioned that at the very beginning. But if you have to hire a designer just to do your icon, and a lot of designers are actually just icon designers, they don't do UI and things like that. It's definitely worth the investment. This is something that users will see immediately. If it stands out in the store listing, in the list of apps that they in their search results, if it stands out, then that's going to be well worth the conversions that you get. So. Moving on to design news, and again, we're way over time, but I think this is actually pretty good for a scheduling kerfuffle. Not a scheduling kerfuffle, but the kerfuffle that happened with our technology in the beginning. So for design news, we have only a few things. So speaking of launcher icons, Michael Cook has actually provided some PSDs of a couple example icons, and it's very similar to the boilerplates in the sense that you can drop in your stuff and tweak it in Photoshop as you see fit. And that's the link there. You can download it, and I'm guessing it's free of charge and all that. Next we have...
So thank you, Michael, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Next, actually, I wanted to highlight one of the designs from the Google Plus community, the Android design community. So Rajesh Honda, sorry if I mispronounced your name, but Rajesh actually has been posting a whole bunch of different examples, design concepts to the Google Plus community, and I think some of them are really wonderful. This specific one has a really unique color palette, and I think it's just really well done. The information that you're currently looking at, the most important information, the unit conversion, right, converting between kilometers and meters, for example. That pops immediately. Nothing else has as much contrast as that. And I think that's just like one of the better designs we've seen from the community. And also, you could there's a little drag handles on the left so that you could switch between converting from kilometers to meters very easily. All right, and the last piece of design news is so we talk a lot about apps on this show, but we don't really talk about games, and that's because mostly, usually games have their own very, very custom, bespoke UI. And this is an example of a puzzle game that uses lots and lots of Holo elements, and even uses the Holo color palette in a really successful way. So I just wanted to point out that if you're building a game, especially like a puzzle game or like a brain teaser, things like that, you don't have to have your own custom UI. You can definitely succeed still with Holo. So just wanted to point that out and put it out there for y'all to check out. Anything else that we missed, Nick, before we sign off?
No, I think that's covered it.
All right. Okay. So thanks again for joining. As always, I'm Roman Urich.
And bye from me, Nick Butcher.
And we will see you hopefully next week, where Adam will join us once again. Adam actually couldn't make it today because of some stuff at home. Oh wait, he's on vacation. That's right. But yes, so hopefully we'll join you next week. As always, see you next time on Azure Design.
And remember to tune into the App Clinic this Friday as well to see those guys do with some of these football score apps as well.
That's right. All right. See y'all. Thanks for joining.